exclusive inventory, fragmented tech, high minimums. Programmatic is built for the few, but advertisers need scale without the complexity. AdLib sits above it all, orchestrating activation, optimizing 24/7, 365, and giving you back 40% of the time spent juggling multiple DSPs and media partners. One login, every platform. No trade-offs. Go to getadlib.com, GETADLIB.com.
A word from our sponsors. Philo Ads brings performance-focused CTV advertising to brands of every size. With over 900 million ad impressions each month, no minimum spend, and a brand-safe environment, Philo Ads makes it easy to scale your campaigns with confidence. Ready to see how Philo Ads can work for you? Head to ads.philo.tv. That's ads.philo.tv to get started today.
Welcome to the AdTech God Pod, your window into the world of advertising technology and the people behind it. I'm your host, AdTech God.
Welcome to the AdTech God Pod, where we are joined by the revenue leaders of our industry. Today, I'm joined by Rachael Savage, Senior Vice President, Ad Revenue Operations at Hearst. Rachael has a very impressive background, having spent the past 2.5 years at Hearst, nearly 5 years at Condé Nast, Google, the New York Times, and more. Rachael was suggested by a prior guest, so I'm excited to get to know her and what she sees on the horizon for publishers. Rachael, thank you for joining me today. Welcome to the pod.
Awesome. Happy to be here. Thanks.
Rachael, we were chatting before the pod. You were highly recommended by a friend. I love anyone that is revenue generating, operational savvy. So I'm really looking forward to chatting with you.
Great.
Rachael, can you give me a little bit of a understanding of your background, having worked at Google and major publisher like Condé Nast and now Hearst? If you wanted to kind of take it back a little bit, let me know how you reached the point where you're at today as a senior vice president, and then we'll just continue on with the chat.
Sure. So I think, where I would say I started my career, and maybe I'll go back really far. This is going to be a little bit weird, but when I was in 7th grade, I had a best friend who was taking a computer camp over the summer. And I told all of our friends about her taking computer camp. She got really mad at me. And I didn't mean to embarrass her, but I went home to my mom and I said, Lauren's going to computer camp and she's mad at me because I told everybody. And my mom said, well, it's time for you to go to computer camp too. So that summer, I learned how to write HTML. And I can very much connect that experience to where I am right now. I, went to college for communications. I was interested in sort of where things are going on the web. And I think that's how you end up in ad ops. That's always the question, is like, nobody finishes college and says, I want to work in ad operations, but here we are. So I finished school and worked for SmartBrief, which was an email newsletter publication. I think they're still kicking. And did, I think the benefit of that experience was, working at a startup and being jack of all trades, working in email, doing everything from ad ops to pricing to media kits. And I applied for a job at the New York Times on a whim and I got it. And it was sort of like, oh my gosh, I have to move to New York for this job at the New York Times, which felt like a big deal back then. But I spent the next 10 years at the New York Times. I started the same year the iPhone came out, and the experiences we had at the New York Times during that period, we were using a proprietary ad server at the time, which in retrospect, was a server in New Jersey. It was a literal server. I think it's really cool now that I've sort of navigated ad tech the way that we have. It came with its own challenges, but during that time, we had to figure out how to get ads on mobile apps. We introduced a subscription model. We eventually, programmatic came along and ad networks were evolving, and all of a sudden header bidding came along, and you can't do header bidding with a proprietary ad server. This is literally a server because the content and the ads came before all of the auctions. And so that was a forcing function for the Times to move to Google. So I sort of think about the 10 years I had at Google, and it gave me this breadth of experience and, relationships with people in media, understanding, how the New York Times functioned, with the editorial side of the house and the business and how the business was evolving. I think on those times fondly with everybody I worked there, looking at print to digital and then digital to, subscription service and beyond. So 10 years at the New York Times. And, I left the New York Times for Google, and I spent a year at Google, and it was such a culture shock for me. I think I was in an operations role there, and it's very different thinking about the machine that is Google versus, working on the media side of the equation, where you can kind of connect the dots between an earnings call and, campaign manager on your team and the work that the team is doing every day, where Google, that was a little bit harder. So luckily, all the, friends that I had made along the way at the New York Times, were at Google, right? We were doing a Google partnership. We onboarded Google during that period. And so when it was time for me to get out of Google, that set me on the way to Condé Nast. 5 years at Condé Nast, and then more recently, 2 years at Hearst Magazines. We're, if you think about Hearst has got multiple media divisions, newspapers, television, and magazines. We are collaborative, but work a little bit independently because of the products and services that we do. So I oversee revenue operations for the magazines division.
Now, Hearst covers a variety of publishers, right? That's like Cosmo, Elle.
You got it. Cosmo, Elle, Esquire, Good Housekeeping. We have 30 brands here in the US, and many of those go globally. That number grows exponentially when we think about the global footprint of Hearst.
Do you run revenue ops for all of it?
Just the US. Just the US
market.
Yep.
Awesome. When you were working and shifting into kind of like you had mentioned, the mobile phone came out and that changed everything. How did that impact the way you looked at monetizing inventory, distribution of content? Because during that time, that's when really social networks started to scale. Mm-hmm. And we saw the shift of consumption of content change a lot. How did that impact your role? How did that make you feel about the direction of the industry?
Sure. I mean, I think at the times, and as you were sort of asking that question, what went through my mind is, while I've worked at maybe 3 different, publishing houses, the New York Times is very different as a news service versus sort of magazine and lifestyle content. And I think that, the primary goal of the New York Times, for very good reason, is to, prioritize the news and get the news report out. They think about that with every page load they do. And so I just remember thinking about mobile experiences at the New York Times, or how do we do that through, mobile web or apps, and how are we creating apps and services that meet the user. I think it was a really innovative time for the New York Times, where they would create mobile apps, but sort of see what worked, and were okay with, a product launching and sort of learning something from it and failing. And I use the New York Times app on my phone, and you can think about where they've come from, between now and then. But I would say that my experience during that period, which it's been a while now, was much more focused on how are we delivering the news report, but then how are we getting the ads to serve in the apps? And, how do we know that we're using this, at the time was a homegrown ad server, which was brilliant, but to be interoperable with the rest of, the ad tech ecosystem, it really forced a change for us. And so that's what the shift to Google was about. I think that we prioritized mobile in that project so that we could be monetizing our apps and websites more effectively. But I also think that there was a lot of we introduced iPad apps. There was a lot of rich media innovation that went along with that. So it was a fun period. I look back on it fondly. But I would say that, it wasn't so much about social distribution at that point, but I can say in my seat now, many years later, it's paramount. And when I look across, what we do here at Hearst Magazines, I think that, how we're thinking about how our brands show up on social platforms is just as important as how they show up on building web and, really mobile experiences. We need to reach our audiences everywhere and really think about how we're working with advertisers to tailor messages and sort of show up in all of those places. So it's a huge part of what we do here.
It's also, you shifted from a news publisher like the New York Times into more of, I guess, lifestyle luxury brands like Condé Nast, and, Hearst has so many variety of publishers as well. The need for speed of publishing news content definitely changed during mobile, I would think, where it's no longer publishing a news article at 9 a.m. or 6 a.m. to get it out in front of people's homes or on their laptops. It's now very accessible by phone. It's like your news cycle is 24/7, 360, like you're pushing content out all the time. And that probably creates a lot of volatility in ad inventory and the way you monetize.
This podcast is brought to you by XD. Looking to get more from every impression? Meet XD, the outcome-based media platform built for results. Powered by proprietary agentic AI, XD doesn't guess, it knows. By analyzing over 30 real-time data signals across billions of daily impressions, XD predicts and automates what works and eliminates what doesn't. The result? Media campaigns tailored to your KPIs, optimized in real time for performance, efficiency, and scale. Whether you're a marketer chasing ROI or a publisher looking to boost yield, XD's custom-built decisioning models will work for you. XD, predict, perform, repeat. That's EXTE, XD.
Yeah. I mean, I think we on the magazine side of things, we see that sometimes. I think it's like more pop culture related and maybe a little less newsy depending on the brand we're talking about. You know, you could think about something like Good Housekeeping, which is really focused on product reviews, is really more influenced by probably search behavior and new products or sort of seasonal trends where, you know, we have some brands that could be a little bit more newsworthy. I actually love everything that Esquire is doing right now. I think that they, you know, are doing storytelling, but I think some of those features, you know, depending on where they catch on, like Apple News as a service, we find that Esquire is really getting a lot of eyeballs there. And so it just really depends on where we're distributing and what we're covering during that period.
How is revenue operations across your print and your digital running today? Is that something that you manage on your own, or are there two separate teams? Is the print and the digital kind of two different orgs?
They're two different orgs, but they're all within my team. And I would say that, you know, print is important to us and digital is where a lot of our focus goes. And so we all kind of roll up under the same team. And, you know, there are places I think where there becomes some synergy. Maybe it's, you know, our agency partnerships or larger advertising agreements, but that's sort of like on the sales and client facing side of things and how we want to show up for them. So it's sort of an evolving work in progress as the landscape changes.
What do you think is the biggest opportunity for you guys going into the second half of this year in terms of, you know, revenue opportunity with such a variety of publishers? Where are you seeing, I guess, the growth happening? Is it creative? Is it, you know, obviously content is a huge role in it, but where are you seeing the biggest opportunity for revenue as Hearst overall?
I think about the brands that were in our, you know, magazine's portfolio, and I think they represent a spectrum of interests and audiences and, you know, multi-platform. So you could think about brands like Cosmopolitan and, you know, what's happening there. We've got Willow Bennett, who joined as the EIC on that brand. And she is sort of, you know, redefining what Cosmo means, I think, for a newer generation. And that is very social forward. It is a little bit of everywhere. I think when she launched her first issue, there were billboards in Times Square and sort of activation events. And, you know, the way that her team is showing up in social and creating content and engaging with audiences is just a different way to think about a brand. And it's not really a magazine brand. It's a cultural influence. And then you have other, you know, brands in the portfolio, whether it's Harper's Bazaar, Elle, I mentioned Esquire earlier. I think they all kind of show up in different ways, depending on, you know, how our readers are resonating and what the teams are covering. And so I think that's part of the, you know, it's part of the fun here. It's part of the challenge is thinking about how you can think about, when I hear ad tech, I think about, you know, display advertising and programmatic. But at this point, it transcends, you know, media is transcending so many different endpoints and ways that we can show up creatively and with editorial messaging, that it's this sort of interesting intersection of how we're partnering with advertisers and showing up with insights, solutions, creativity the right way. And, maximizing the opportunity to keep the brands going in the future. So, back to your question in terms of the revenue opportunity, I think some brands, it is leaning big into, our online presence. It could be display advertising, our targeting solutions with Aura. It could be affiliate. We lean really well into affiliate where we're making product recommendations in some cases, social distribution, and then in some cases print. Something new for me has been the autos brands. I've been diving into that. We recently acquired Motor Trend, and I think Motor Trend is another one of those sort of 360 opportunities where I'm learning all about the different events that, the autos teams holds around car enthusiasts and what that looks like, but then also, all the way from events and content creation, but also targeting solutions for different, purchase intent or conquesting efforts. So I think they all show up in really interesting ways.
I'm a fan of Motor Trend. I like their site. So I'm glad you guys acquired them. I think they were owned by the Enthusiast Network prior.
Yeah, Warner Brothers.
Oh, was it Warner Brothers? Wow. Things have changed.
It's been, fun getting to know the team and sort of, it's a different world,
Yeah, it is. It's an exciting product line for sure. The automotive space is definitely attractive to so many advertisers. As a revenue leader, where do you spend most of your time? Like, what's your dashboard that you can't live without? That's always something I'm interested in hearing.
Ooh, dashboard I can't live without. We have a lot of dashboards, but I do get one every day that's, going to show me, how the sites, we got to, one, make sure that the lights are on and nothing broke yesterday, but then also how much money we made. And I have my team send that over email every day with, a 2-tweet version of what happened. I love it and I'm glad they do it. So this is my endorsement of that. So it's the dashboard. I mean, how I spend my days, I think that, we're a media company in transformation and transition. And I've been doing this for a while. There's so much changing about our site, traffic patterns and distribution models that multiplied by brands and, regulation that we stay busy. And it's sort of finding those intersections and connecting the dots between different groups here at Hearst. So I can think about this week, I've had some really interesting conversations about how we think about our sort of editorial collaboration on advertising programs and how we bring together sort of that creative talent consultatively, how we do it in a way that everybody understands how we're booking and billing it, how we, come to approach it from a legal perspective, how we actually execute it technically and measure it and talk about it. So I find that my role touches a little bit of everybody and I become that sort of person to bring everybody together and, bring it to life. So
I love it.
That's one thing I've always enjoyed about the roles I'm in.
Definitely. It's also nice because you have this if you wanted, you could be closer to a 35,000 foot view of what's happening across the entire portfolio.
Yes.
Which I think is very different when, you can monitor those trends by publisher type, by content type during some sort of tentpole event or major event that happens that causes these spikes of traffic, or whether it's just, like you said, organic SEO focused traffic that's generated. So I would think that watching these trends could be really interesting to see and then follow over a long period of time where, the fall collection drops for some designer and you see the traffic spike and the interest spike and watching that could be really interesting. I'd geek out over it, to be honest.
I think about, I go back to, the brands that we cover. And it was a little bit this way at Condé Nast too, where I would say that Condé leans a little bit more, we have a really solid fashion and luxury set of brands here with Harper's Bazaar and Esquire and Elle. That business just works a little bit differently. I think that the advertiser expectations are different than we see across other categories. And so how we meet the needs of those advertisers and sort of that editorial product looks very different than Motor Trend, or
definitely
Good Housekeeping or Delish, and that sort of mass population sort of content. And so we're thinking about monetization and talking about those dashboards. I think within the first year of us sort of transforming the monetization strategy for some of those brands, like we started to see a good rhythm, and it starts to shape your product strategy in interesting ways. So it does start to add up when you're looking at that day-to-day dashboard and then looking at the trends over time and sort of recognizing how you can sort of segment the different brands or, audience channels or media types to drive revenue, and making sure that my team is set up to do that and that they sort of understand the nuances and are working in lockstep to get there. So
where do you see the biggest opportunity for the next 6 months for you? What kind of excites you about whether it's the tech coming out in market, whether it's the changes in the way buyers buy, but what truly excites you for the second half of this year? What are you ready for?
I think Q4 starts in September. I know it's not technically Q4, but Q4 starts in September, especially when you're working with fashion brands and you do have Fashion Month, which is a series of fashion weeks in September. So I just kind of, at the operator part of my role, I say no changes to what we do after September because we want everybody's eye on the prize to deliver the revenue and be a good partner to our advertisers and make sure that we do everything we can to ensure success. So that means kind of putting pause on rolling out new stuff. So, I think about what excites me in the second half is gearing up for that season. I think that they're, from a, content perspective and, just change that I've seen at Hearst in the past couple of years, I think we'll have a good, into the year. I think that the brands are doing some exciting things that we'll see expressed through advertiser programs. And then I think about the turn of the year. And, if I think about what's happening in the ecosystem right now, there's some long range development and sort of progress that we want to make on things that has to happen at the same time. And so I can't be on an ad tech podcast and not talk about AI. Right?
It's true. Trust me, I hear it every episode, but like everybody has such a different perspective that I'm like, I love it. Like lean into it, whatever.
I think Hearst as a corporation is doing a really nice job. By the way, there are a lot of really great ad technologists at Hearst Corporation across all of the divisions. I am wholly impressed by the folks that are on the teams and any, opportunity to collaborate with other divisions or sort of at the corporate level. You end up hearing, how everybody's working on these things in new and different ways. But I think Hearst Corporation overall has taken an approach to AI to think about what it means for the content that we create across, whether it's news, newspapers, television, magazines, and making sure that the Hearst sort of credibility comes through and that human judgment and authenticity is still paramount for everything we do. But, there are also really interesting ways that we've seen the teams adopt AI for product development. I will shout out Mike Nuzzo, who is one of my partners on the team, who's really thought about this in terms of how it influences our targeting products and our insights, and is building some interesting things, with Gender A on our team for ad product development. We have been really digging into what it means for our workflow and the relationship to our underlying data foundation and how we can, fast track some of the work happening across the team just to level up the work, to cut out some of the busy things so that we're getting a little bit more insightful and strategic about what we're recommending. But I really think the intersection of those things is interesting, where it's not just the product that we're delivering to advertiser, but the service that we're offering, and somewhere in the middle of the insights that come about. I think AI can influence all of that. And so it's just making sure that we do the right foundational work to get there, and that we are using, in ways that are, helping the teams do interesting stuff. Like I said, I won't change anything going into Q4 unless it's minor and it's going to help the teams. But, one of the things we'll be working on in the background is some, workflow improvements or sort of product enhancements to really turn the year and do some new things.
So if you're an ad tech vendor, please reach out in January.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not happening in Q4.
I mean, we can talk, but just like manage your expectations. I'm pretty good about that, of being clear about what I can do when I can do it. But it's a principle that's worked for me so far. And, obviously I think about, as I build my teams, that you always need a group of folks that are thinking about what's happening in the next 12 to 18 months. So that's, I've only been here for 2 years and some change. So that has been an exciting part of building the team out, is having people who are thinking about the strategy and the intersection of strategy and operations, really.
Right.
And so we'll be working on stuff. It's just, everybody's eyes.
We're not rolling it out in Q4, though.
That's right. You got it.
Question for you, Rachael. We chatted prior, we were talking about how busy you've been and how busy we have been with Marketecture Live, which is our second conference planned. But you were still very positive, and you seemed like extremely enthusiastic about the future and everything that's happening. How do you find that balance between, your personal happiness and, of course, the pressures of work and the busyness of work and family and life? What keeps you grounded and what keeps you motivated and moving forward?
That's a very big question. And I'm glad that you are feeling positivity in all my answers, because it's hard some days. And I would say that there have been times, I think at some point last year, I remember looking at somebody, a colleague in a room, and being like, has media always been this hard? Can you think of another time when everything changed all at once? And there's been, a lot of changes, right? Like I talk about my time at the New York Times, and it kind of felt like we were changing business models and we were changing technology, and it was a constant, what's happening next. So I'm used to that, but I just think that it's been profound over the past year or two, especially with, thinking about AI, or just sort of the way that, big tech and content consumption has changed. And it can be hard to keep up. It can feel like we're running at 1,000,000 miles an hour and we don't get everything right sometimes. But, I think that every once in a while there's a project that comes across my desk where you find these, like I was saying to somebody this past week at work, I've found that different departments, we're all kind of chasing down something that feels right, and everybody's expressing it the right way. And I think my job as an operator is to help us communicate and collaborate towards creating an outcome. And so that inspires me to want to sit down and put pen to paper and bring everybody together and bring them along to creating that outcome. So it's that. I think it's finding a sense of humor with those colleagues and, celebrating their creativity and inspiration, but then also being able to laugh at ourselves every once in a while. And so I am blessed to have people around me to do that. When I think about, outside of the Hearst building, the ad tech network and all of, the friends I've made along the way, keep it fun. I know that I have somebody to call when there's a hard question. And so that really keeps me sort of grounded in the space. You go to any of these conferences and you sort of realize you're not alone in solving these problems and can learn from somebody else. And so having somebody to text or, have a drink with and learn that will go a long way. Outside of that, I got a puppy. And so when things get really bad, I just look at my puppy pics these days, and it's like my little dopamine hit, and I'll send those around.
That'll do it.
Everybody happy sometimes too. So.
Amazing. Rachael, thank you. And thank you to Hearst for coming on as my guest. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the chat.
Of course. I love what you're doing. And thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the AdTech God Pod, a podcast for the people, about the people. Stay connected with me for more insights, trends, and interviews in the realm of AdTech. Don't miss out on the latest updates, so follow me on X, Instagram, and connect with me on LinkedIn. Don't forget, ATG Slack community has insights, networking opportunities, and jobs. Keep the conversation going and stay at the forefront of AdTech innovation.